I do predict that the year 2021 will continue to express an escalation within the UFO subject. I do predict that this is ultimately all going to climax with confirmation. I obviously don't know, but it's the trend that I see, and it's what I anticipate. Over the last 36 months, we've made incredible strides. I see no compelling reason why that's going to evaporate. Now, when you have people like Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, other people in government of names we do not know, and journalists starting to cover it more, great documentaries coming out, people on UFO Twitter working hard to get the issue out into the public domain, researchers from all walks of life engaging this subject, I see an escalation continuing. In a recent Tucker Carlson episode, he said that if this wasn't an election year, he'd be dedicating an entire hour, if not an entire week, to this UFO subject. It's that important. And I think that sort of theme is going to become more prevalent in the coming 4 years with a new administration. Whether you like Trump, whether you dislike Trump, the man, because of his demeanor and tweets and so forth, he sucked up a lot of the oxygen of journalists within the United States. Now that oxygen will return. And with that return of oxygen, I think that the mainstream media will cover the UFO subject with more regularity and in more depth. They're going to probably need to, frankly. Without Trump in office, a lot of what they focused on will no longer be available to them to focus on. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should not heavily focus on COVID. Obviously, we should. And I'm not suggesting we should move away from covering COVID so that we can cover UAP more. What I am saying is that with a more quote-unquote boring administration coming in 20 days, there's going to be a lot more time to cover other stuff, such as UFOs. And I think that's going to happen, frankly. Now, the big recent UFO news is that the Omni Act was signed by the president. Within that Omni Act is the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021. Within that is a request by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Now, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is an intelligence oversight committee within the Senate. They have requested to receive a report on what exactly the U.S. government knows about UFOs. Highly classified information. What do they know? Now, as Nick Pope has stated, the good news is that the countdown to receive that report has begun. And that countdown is exactly 180 days, but they could receive it before 180 days. It just means that they have to receive it within 180 days. But the bad news, as Nick Pope explained, is that there's no guarantee that the public will get any of the juicy stuff about what the U.S. government actually knows about UFOs. But what I would say to that is, whether the public gets that juicy stuff or not, we've made incredible progress because at least people within the Congress who should be briefed on this are going to get briefed on this. Furthermore, even if they can't reveal classified information, it's not like they can't talk about what they know in general terms. I mean, Luis Elizondo does this all the time. I like to point out that he has stated before that him and his colleagues, when he was working at ATIP, all came to the strong assessment that these UAP are not originating from any military inventory in the world based upon their flight characteristics, based upon having no intelligence that these machines were constructed in China or Russia, etc. Now, I will grant you that many members of Congress have been briefed on UAP and have received highly classified briefings on UAP. Not unclassified briefings, classified briefings, seeing stuff that the public has not been able to have the luxury to see. But this report that has been requested by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is just much more information on top of what they've already seen. And if you look at a guy like the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Marco Rubio, he's already expressed very clearly that these machines may come from other worlds. I mean, he said this explicitly. And so as this all progresses and committees within the Congress get that 180-day report, while it's true that they cannot cite specifics that are classified, would it surprise me if some members of Congress would say something like, we looked over the information and we got to be honest, we feel there's a good chance that whatever this is not originating from human civilization. Now, various people within the United States Congress started to say that, then I think that would have a huge impact in the disclosure process, frankly. I believe in the accumulation principle. Now, I don't know if I made that up or not, but it's just something I've been thinking about. The accumulation principle, as it relates to the disclosure process, is that you can never just say, well, this has all happened before and it's just repeating itself. That actually doesn't make sense, because according to the accumulation principle, every new development is stacked on top of other developments that precede it. And therefore, on that basis, the new developments have more power than they could have if they were happening in a vacuum. And they're not happening in a vacuum. So if you are to go back in time and look at the various developments that have occurred over this 70-plus year historical record, you would have to recognize that all of it sort of feeds off each other, and none of it happens in a vacuum. So based upon that alone, we are far more ahead than we've ever been by definition. And I think there's validity to that perspective. I think that the stigma is going to continue to decline. And I think it's easy to lose sight of over how powerful a psychological force the UFO stigma is. I mean, prior to December 16th, 2017, if you were to look at the UFO subject being covered in the media, often the status quo is simply the giggle factor. The X-Files music turning on when they're about to discuss it. A lack of seriousness toward the subject. Even a disrespect to the subject, I would argue. Maybe with the built-in assumption that this is all silliness and we don't want to be associated with this subject because we don't want to come off as crazies. Well, that's changed. That perspective has not proven valid. That was an invalid perspective based upon limited data. Perspectives can come off as rather persuasive when you have limited data, right? It's very inconvenient when you get more data and it starts to paint a completely different picture. And I believe that is happening very forcefully right now. I mean, right after December 16th, 2017, one of the first things we saw was Commander David Fravor, the squadron leader for the VFA 41 Black Aces, Top Gun pilot. He made his rounds in mainstream media, television, print, you name it. He was everywhere. And he made it very clear that it was his assessment that what he encountered on November 14th, 2004 was a technological machine that does not originate from human civilization. He said it clearly, he said it adamantly, and that's his assessment. And he also stated that everyone that was present during that encounter had the same assessment he did. And he said that he and the others saw it for 5 minutes at least, and that he got within a half mile of that machine. Now, when you have a Top Gun pilot say this very soberly, it becomes a little harder to make jokes about this subject, particularly when it's a huge national security issue. And this is a machine that was able to evade the best measures of a state-of-the-art carrier strike group. This is a very serious thing. It's not something you joke about. It's not something you make up. It's not something you sort of have fun with. And so that became a highly established fact. It's not a fact that the machine that was encountered was of alien origin, but it's a fact that very credible people came to that assessment. And then very credible radar operators and technicians came to the assessment that whether it's an alien machine or not, it's certainly doing things that are well beyond what is known to exist in any military inventory in the world. And Elizondo has stated that there's lots more tapes. There's lots more events like this where the military is dumbfounded. What could this be? They don't think adversaries have it. It's almost certain that the U.S. doesn't have it. What's going on? But what you have to understand is that this is nothing new. The U.S. military and other militaries have been encountering mysterious craft for decades, acquiring forensic evidence of those encounters, sometimes from multiple systems, multiple witnesses. Just because the media for 70 years failed to give the credence this information deserved doesn't mean that that information did not exist. It did exist. It did exist. And that stigma is starting to decline. And I think that's going to facilitate us looking at all that information with a more serious and more objective perspective. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm working on a major disclosure update, so consider this the appetizer for that main course. And I will see you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.